world of Akkad, unifies both the Akkadian world and the Sumerian world in the south into one empire, the first historic empire in world history.
More than 4 millennia have gone by since the name of Enheduanna was mentioned. She lived in ancient Mesopotamia more than 4,300 years ago, and no one before, nor many since, can be classified as the first known author in human history. Yet Enheduanna was no ordinary writer. As a high priestess and daughter to Sargon of Akkad, also known as Sargon the Great, founder of the Akkadian Empire, she wielded great power. Today, we take you through the life of a woman whose voice, though time-bound, carries to us the story of devotion, exile, and the divine. Born around 2285 BCE, Enheduanna was no ordinary princess. Her father, Sargon of Akkad, managed to carve out one of history's first empires, uniting many independent city-states of Mesopotamia under one rule. In a society where religion and politics were deeply connected, gaining power required more than just military strength. It also needed spiritual power. Therefore, Sargon appointed his daughter as high priestess of the moon god Inana in the city of Ur. Enheduanna was appointed not only to maintain the rituals in the temples, but also to ensure political stability in the vast empire that spanned the Akkadian and Sumerian cultures. Her appointment was not just symbolic, it was strategic as well. As a high priestess, Enheduanna ruled one of the most important temples in Mesopotamia. She was not only a religious leader who would perform ceremonies and administer lands belonging to the temple, but also a political figure responsible for the temple's wealth and influence. This position placed her at the center of a cultural political network across the empire. Still, the impact of Enheduanna's legacy extended far beyond religious leadership. Her contribution to human history was much deeper. Her writings will certainly be remembered as having an impact on the world as the world's first named author. Her most famous work is the Exaltation of Inana. It was a religious hymn and a personal account of her struggles. It was composed during a time of political turmoil. It reflects the deep emotions of a woman in exile. After her father's death, political chaos arose within the empire. Enheduanna was ousted from her authority by a usurper named Lugal-Ane, a rebel leader in Ur. In exile, she used her writing to cry out for help, pleading that the goddess Inana would restore her to power. The Exaltation of Inana vividly shows Enheduanna's despair and how she remained clinging to the goddess. In it, she describes how she was stripped of her crown and sent into the desert. Her isolation can be felt in every line. Still, she held on to the belief that Inanna would help her. In this way, the poem is both a personal lament and a hymn in praise of divine justice, a masterpiece of the ability to imbue the individual with the divine. Her use of the first-person point of view, a technique that was not common at the time, gave her writing an emotional power that had never been seen before. She was thus not only the first known author, but also the first one to infuse literature with personal emotion. Religious poetry would now be transformed into a deeply human experience. The importance of Enheduanna's texts lies in the fact that she was composing and building religious stories. Her hymns to Inanna elevated this particular goddess to the highest rank in the gods' hierarchy, an intentional act that represented, on the one hand, her deep personal spiritual commitment, and on the other, pragmatic political strategy. When Enheduanna glorified Inanna's power and described her as fierce and uncompromising, she supported her time's political regime. She is the goddess of love and war, and she is a protector and avenger. And it was to this divine protection that Enheduanna appealed during her exile. But Enheduanna's writings extended beyond the Exaltation of Inanna. She is also credited with composing the temple hymns, a collection of 42 hymns dedicated to the gods of various Sumerian city-states. These hymns were a masterstroke of cultural diplomacy. Each hymn honoured the city's patron deity and merged Akkadian and Sumerian religious traditions into a living, organic theological framework. In doing so, Enheduanna was not merely a poet, she was creating a religious connection among the various populations of her father's empire, reinforcing the political unity that Sargon had established. Her work was full of political significance. Enheduanna promoted a religious and political vision of harmony using her position and literary talents. Enheduanna's hymns humanized the gods, portraying them as capable of emotion, conflict, and compassion. This change in tone brought the gods closer to the people, connecting the rulers who served them to spiritual and earthly leadership. Still, Enheduanna was not without her trials. The tale of her expulsion, as vividly told in the exaltation of Inana, seems to come during a time of revolt against the Akkadian Empire. Following Sargon's death, the empire quickly dissolved under various contenders for leadership, and in Ur, Lugal-Ane's revolt sent Enheduanna from her throne. She describes the anguish of losing her role, the feeling of abandonment by the gods, and the burning desire for justice in her writings. However, despite all these challenges, she never lost faith in Inanna. Eventually, Enheduanna's nephew, Naram-Sin, restored order to the empire, and Enheduanna was restored to her position as high priestess. Her return to power ended the crisis in her own life and symbolized the return of divine order after the rebellion. It speaks to her strength as both a leader and a writer, that she could navigate the turbulent political landscape of her time while continuing to perform her religious functions. What really drives the fascination with Enheduanna's story is not so much her status as the world's first known author, but how her writings stand the test of time. Though she was dead 500 years, the scribes were still making copies and studying her hymns at that point. Her influence went far beyond her lifetime, shaping Mesopotamia's intellectual and religious traditions and inspiring successive generations of writers. The presence of copies of her works, even in the scribal schools of other countries, is proof of the enduring power of her voice. Despite scholars' debates over whether Enheduanna herself wrote these works, the personal nature of the writings and the consistent attribution to her suggests that she was indeed the author. Even though later scribes adapted or copied her hymns, the originality of her voice and the innovation of writing from a personal perspective are uniquely hers. She transformed the role of religious hymns, using them to praise the gods and explore human emotion, political power, and personal devotion. Not only have Enheduanna's writings survived the passage of time, but they have also gained renewed attention in modern scholarship. She is a true role model of early female empowerment, a woman who held great authority in a male-dominated society and used her voice to shape the world around her. Her works offer a rare glimpse into the mind of a woman who witnessed and shaped history. Enheduanna's legacy continues to inspire today. Other materials, including an alabaster disc found by archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley in 1927, give evidence of her time and set life. The disc shows Enheduanna doing a religious ceremony and highlights her importance in religious and political life. Her writings, which were preserved on clay tablets, are a direct connection to her thoughts, her struggles, and her devotion. At a time when women's voices were muted, Enheduanna spoke out so clearly and so powerfully. She was more than a high priestess, more than a poet. She was a pioneer, shaping the future of literature and laying the foundations for the role of authorship. Thanks, guys. If you enjoyed this inspiring story of Enheduanna, please like, share, and subscribe for more interesting insights into the lives of history's most influential figures.